Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Hello, Patrick Donoghue here, news editor with the Irish Farmers Journal. More than 5,000 farmers gathered at Grange Farm on Tuesday for Teagasc's annual beef event. The Irish Farmers Journal was there too, and William Conlon and Peter Farley talked to some of the advisors and visitors taking part.
William Conlon here. I'm here at Beef 2016 with Ned Heffernan, dry stock advisor. Ned, what would be your top tips for summer management?
If very quickly grass can go out of control, if stocking rates aren't right, and if with different growths during the year. So walk your farm regularly, walk it on a weekly basis, identify if you have too much grass or too little grass. If you have a surplus, take it out. If you're running short of grass, take remedial action. If fertiliser is needed, fertiliser nitrogen, give it a boost. Maybe a bag of nitrogen might be sufficient at this stage of the year. But basically walk your farm, keeping in touch with your grass covers and the amount of grass you have on the farm.
And at what heights should farmers be putting cattle in and taking cattle out of paddocks?
Well, you're talking about 1,400 kilos of dry matter per hectare, so between 9 and 10 centimetres in height. You're taking them out at 4 centimetres would be kind of the optimum height this time of the year with good grazing conditions.
And are farmers keen to learn today from your experiences?
Yeah, there's a good appetite for one-on-one questions, especially young farmers who are taking over the family farm or maybe getting land back that's been in tillage and talking about dividing up fields, working out field sizes or stocking rates and how to divide up paddocks.
That's perfect. Thank you very much, Ned.
No bother.
Paul Fitzpatrick from Trim, County Meath, only over the road from here now.
Are you farming yourself at home?
Yeah, we're suckling farming at home there now.
And have you taken anything out of today? Anything you can do on your own farm maybe to improve efficiency or?
Grassland management is something that's key now, and trying to get more efficient rather than pushing output on the farm at home. I want to get more efficient where we are at the minute and look for the long-term goal now.
Brexit, what are your feelings on it? There's a lot of uncertainty out there. How do you think it'll affect your farm or other beef enterprises? Is it negative or positive in your opinion?
Yeah, well, I suppose at the minute it's hard to know. It's up in the air, and I suppose no one really knows. But it's hard to know for the long term. But at the short term, it seems to be showing negative talk and a negative vibe. And as soon as you hear that, it shows nearly in cattle rings in the markets in particular. You can see last week alone, I think cattle were back €50 a head there. So you would imagine it's a negative effects, but farming industry in particular now. But hopefully now the north-south relations now will stay strong now.
John Kelly from Roscommon.
So John, your initial reaction to Brexit, what do you think? How will it affect the trade for beef in Ireland?
Well, slightly worried on our markets since the UK is a very big importer of our produce, but I think in the long term it's going to be better for industry overall, for European markets and getting through regulations. So I think as a quality control in the long run it should help us out. But I think in the short term we're going to have a rough patch, and it's already hitting the markets as is, so hopefully right over the road.
You're a Teagasc advisor yourself, John. How are you finding today now?
Today is very good. People are very positive. They're very interested in the new technologies we have here, particularly the grassland demonstrations here on paddock grazing, the target sward heights, and indefinitely soil fertility, and how they can maximise amount of grass growing and in turn improve profitability on the farms.
Perfect, John. Thanks very much for talking to me.
Conor O'Malley.
Conor, your initial reaction to Brexit?
From an agriculture point of view, it's probably hard to see the positives anyway, certainly short term. Definitely with the weakness of the pound, for that immediate shockwave with the pound getting weaker, can't do any good to us for export. So it's interesting times, but you would be a little bit nervous going forward. But look, after a couple of years of flux, I'm sure things will even themselves out and trade agreements will be done, etc. And hopefully things will not be too bad. But certainly there might be a year or two of flux. And certainly, particularly with the beef sector and other things like mushrooms, where we do a lot of export to the UK, you'd prefer not to have that. You just prefer if things were a bit steadier. Yeah.
What sort of farm have you at home, Conor?
I'm a farm manager, beef, sucklers and potatoes and a bit of horticulture as well.
And have you taken anything out of today now?
I probably am about to come to probably the most interesting bit probably for me is the reseeding plots and all that. It's supposed to be quite interesting. Maybe the synchronisation on the suckler cows is something we've done this spring. So it was interested to see that plot there and see how it's going, yeah.
Thanks very much, Conor.
William Conlon here with the Farmers Journal. I'm here at Beef 2016 with Catherine Keena, the Countryside Management Specialist. Catherine, I'm just wondering what farmers who haven't gone into GLOS, what are their options now?
Well, the main thing is to consider it now this autumn. Glass 3, the final tranche of glass for this rural development programme, is expected to reopen maybe September, October, and we don't know the final details, but we'll expect it similar to what's in Glass 2. So the priority people are people with commonage or natura land, special areas or special high status watercourses. But if you're not in one of those, the key thing for beef farmers is to consider choosing either spreading their slurry with low emission equipment such as trailing shoe, or growing wild bird cover. By doing either of these two actions, it will increase their chances of getting into the scheme. So they're the two key ones that you need to consider. Would they suit you? And then if they do, then what other actions? There's 25 different actions there to make up the money.
And is the low input permanent pasture, what area can farmers get in that? Because I know it was reduced.
I don't know, will it be changed again? So we assume it'll be the 5 hectares.
And what other measures would you encourage farmers if they're trying to bump up the payment they can get?
Every farm is different. The wild bird cover is a very good one for farmers that want to make money as well, if it suits them to grow a few hectares of it. There's probably as much margin in it as there is in some of the cattle enterprises. The other one that's really the highest pay in action is fencing off the watercourses 30 metres out. There's nearly €1,200 per hectare for doing that. Now I know it goes against the grain, but it's a very good one because you can farm intensively outside that and leave your 30 metres along a watercourse. You must cut it once a year, which is good from the farmer's point of view because then it doesn't become rough or scrubby. So that is one I would love to highlight, that of the money that's in it. If you have a watercourse, any watercourse on your farm, if you fence off 30 metres outside it, you will get €1,200 per hectare.
And for the month of July now, there's a lot of deadlines. Would you be able to outline a few of them for farmers?
Well, the people who are the existing 38,000 farmers who are in glass, and as you mentioned, one of the very popular measures is the low input pasture and the hay meadows. So the hay meadows now can be cut from the 1st of July, and the low input permanent pasture can be topped from the 15th of July. The people who have undertaken the watercourse option have to have their fences in place by the end of July. They're the very current deadlines.
Thanks very much, Catherine.
For more from the Teagasc annual Beef 2016 event, log on to farmersjournal.ie and read this week's Irish Farmers Journal.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Meanwhile, the ripples from last month's Brexit vote in the UK are still being felt. Owen Lowry and Lorcan Allen, our agribusiness desk, joined exporting companies at a briefing held by Bord Bia this Wednesday. They meet Bord Bia's Director of Markets Pádraig Brennan, Joe Coppenstake, Chief Retail and Consumer Goods Analyst with The Economist, and Larry Murren, Chief Executive of Dawn Farm Foods.
I'm here this morning with Pádraig Brennan, Director of Markets at the Bord Bia Brexit seminar to discuss the impacts of the Brexit referendum on Irish agri-food exports. Pádraig, I suppose just to start off, how important is the UK to Irish agri-food exports?
It's the number one export market that we have, taking about 41% of our food and drink exports every year. Last year the trade was worth €4.4 billion. And you look across all the sectors that we have for beef, it takes over half for beef, 30% of our dairy, over 85% of all our mushrooms go to the UK. So virtually in every category that we have, the UK is the single biggest market for us.
And what would be the categories that would be the most affected? So is beef is a very large market, about 50% of our beef. And the dairy side, in the dairy aisle, what products are going to be likely most affected?
On the dairy side, really, I suppose, is cheese. About 65% of all the cheddar cheese that we produce every year goes to the UK. So straight away, that's an obvious category that will come under pressure as well.
So a very important market. And what are the immediate concerns of the possible Brexit when and if it does happen?
Well, the most immediate concern has been very visible since the vote on it was announced, if you like, early on the 24th of June, is what we've seen in terms of happening, the exchange rate between the euro and sterling. We've seen sterling weaken by the bones of 16% over that period of time. that straight away has an impact on the competitiveness of Irish products going into the UK market. It presents a challenge for exporters to say, well, how can we recover that difference in competitiveness, if you like, in terms of either higher prices or looking at their own cost base. So straight away it's presenting a challenge. Now you will have in a number of the sectors that we're talking about in terms of meat and dairy, you will have some hedging done that will see us through the next number of months, maybe early into 2017. But thereafter, if that currency uncertainty persists, then you have straight away a challenge to the sector.
And looking outside the UK, Bord Bia has been very active in growing and opening up new markets. I suppose, what has the performance over the last year been like in some of those markets, or how have they grown?
You say markets outside of Europe generally have shown very strong growth over the last number of years. They've increased, so in the last 6 years, they've increased by more than 40%. So what we've seen there is markets in Asia, particularly China and Southeast Asia, North America, Middle East and Africa have shown very strong double-digit growth over the last number of years. So we are seeing more markets emerging and becoming larger over a period of time. But I suppose the thing about the UK market is obviously we have a history there with very strong trading relationships there, and I think if you look at the results of the survey that we did with companies in the immediate aftermath of the Leave vote, there's still that strong desire among Irish food and drink companies to maintain their presence in the UK as much as they possibly can. So I don't think it's a matter of simply saying we're leaving the UK and moving elsewhere. We have to see how we can retain those strong relationships that we have in the UK, retain as much of that business that we possibly can, and at the same time be looking elsewhere for other opportunities. So we have that mix or that balance of markets that delivers the best return we can possibly get.
Thanks very much, Pádraig. It seems all very uncertain at the moment, and we hope that in the weeks to come that things will become a lot clearer. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm now with John Copestake, who is a retail analyst at The Economist magazine in the UK. John, what do you see as the immediate impact from a retail point of view of this Brexit vote?
Well, so the very first thing has obviously been the decline in the value of sterling. So the fact that the euro is now 17% stronger than sterling, 16% stronger than sterling, means that there's obviously going to be an inflationary impact on imports. That's going to push up prices for retailers. Now, retailers don't have much wiggle room here. Retailers are in a situation where they already have tight margins, and they've been getting tighter since 2007, 2008. They've been driven by discounters. Consumers have been much more austere. There's been austerity in the UK for a while as well. And that means that they're going to be pushing back a lot on the supply chains. Now, supply chains may be inured to this. They may have hedged against currency volatility, and many will have. But how long these hedges last, is going to be one factor, because once they come to an end, then there will be a new normal where prices actually have to rise, and prices have to rise either be passed on to the consumer, or borne by the retailer, or borne by suppliers.
And we've seen like the big four in the UK, where the retail market is a lot different than it was 4 or 5 years ago, where the margins have been squeezed. Is that margin there for them to either absorb that 16% price rise, or is the margin further down the chain at the manufacturing level for them to, who is going to absorb that, or are they going to pass on the 16% price rise?
Well, they won't be passing it on to consumers, certainly not the whole in its entirety. But let's not forget that the 16% price rise is only a small component of the end price anyway. So if it's 16% price rise in raw materials, or then obviously that will then go through a manufacturing process, which will add lots and lots of components to the final price. So it will end up in a 2 or 3% price rise maybe, or certainly more modest. But at the end of the day, consumers are going to be fairly bearish over the coming years, especially given the volatility and uncertainty that's going on. So it's unlikely that they're going to want those price rises passed on to them. Retailers have a choice or a balancing act, and that is that they may bear some of it themselves. They may bear some of it themselves by creating efficiencies or cutbacks or consolidating their own position. We've just seen in the last few days that Sainsbury's is closing down its Netto operations in the UK. So there may be some cutbacks that stores make, or that retailers make, in terms of just literally making redundancies or cutting back on their own margins to preserve margin. But then on top of that, obviously they will be negotiating probably a little harder with their suppliers to try and offset this potential price rise that comes through. A lot also then depends on the future performance of the pound. I mean, there could be a bounce back. There could be the euro could find that it also declines and depreciates and becomes more aligned. Certainly, our expectation is that the dollar will remain strong, but that's not going to be necessarily the case for the euro all the time as well.
Yeah, and of course we have been here before with the euro sterling rate, but I suppose the macroeconomic situation is a lot different now. Do you think that the food buyers in the UK will look to further afield now outside the EU and start sourcing product?
I think that it's very early to say. We still have we haven't invoked Article 50 in the UK yet. We've got when we do invoke Article 50, we have a minimum of 2 years negotiations. Now, those negotiations could go on much longer than 2 years. Greenland had a 6-year exit plan from the European Union, and that was a tiny country. So the UK has much more to negotiate. I think that beyond that, I think that there may then be negotiations with other countries for trade deals. That's one of the reasons why the Leave campaign campaigned to leave, so that they could negotiate many of these deals. But in terms of guaranteeing supply, there are still going to be very high food standards set in the UK. Countries will still have to meet those standards. So whatever negotiations take place, it's not going to necessarily be a case that we can just immediately offset things with cheaper imports from elsewhere. And we may need to find that the supply chains in these countries that get negotiated much further down the line, have to up their game as well. So it's kind of quite a fluid situation. It's also worth bearing in mind that Ireland will benefit from the Common Agricultural Policy even as the UK leaves it. So whatever competitive disadvantage Ireland has given the currency shortfall may find itself reversed if the UK doesn't actually act to fill the gap that the Common Agricultural Policy gives for UK farmers.
Yeah. Okay, thanks very much, John.
I'm here with Larry Murren, Chief Executive of Dawn Farm Foods. Larry, can you give us some of your thoughts that you were here this morning at the Bord Bia breakfast launch?
Lorcan, the challenge for the Irish food and agri sector is indeed a big challenge. It's unprecedented. We have faced many collective challenges in the sector over the last 30 years, but certainly none like this, with the degree of uncertainty that this has attaching to it. Any Irish company who, just give you one example in the very, very short term, and it's just one of several challenges we have to face, and this is as true for inside the farm gate as it is outside the farm gate. And this industry touches the fabric of life in every parish in Ireland, and there's more than 200,000 direct jobs involved inside and outside the farm gate. So if you take the exchange rate alone, as of this morning there was a 16% differential between the sterling-euro exchange rate as to what existed as a mean average in 2014-2015. Do we think we're going to just be able to knock on our UK customers' doors and recover that 16% tomorrow? Somehow or another, I don't think it's going to be as simple as that. Where is the elasticity going to come about? I'm not sure. Nobody is sure. So this is what we need to focus on in the short to medium term, so that the government and the industry players acknowledge the special role that the Irish agri-food sector has to play in the Irish economy, and take concrete steps to protect all the jobs, all the incomes, all the livelihoods that are enshrined within that industry, and that has really, really been invested in over a 50-year period.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
The IFA finally has a Connacht chairman. My colleague Anthony Jordan attended the election count on Tuesday night, and he spoke to the winner, Pádraig Joyce, and his opponent, Eddie Davitt.
Anthony Jordan here from the Irish Farmers Journal. I'm here in the Abbey Hotel in Roscommon at the Connacht Regional Chair election. I'm here with Pádraig Joyce. Pádraig, the new Connacht Chair, big congratulations.
Thanks very much.
How was the campaign? How did it go for you? What's your analysis of it?
Yeah, the campaign has gone on for nearly 7 months. Demanding campaign, because we were at a situation where we weren't nominated for a long time, and we had several meetings to see could we get the nomination by 2 people, and eventually we got it, which took up maybe 3 months. And I suppose I could say maybe better late than never, for me anyway.
Farming is going through a hard time, especially in Connacht at the moment. You've got oversupply of milk on the continent, you have Brexit, obviously beef prices. What are the positives in Connacht? What can we look forward to in the next 2 years over your reign?
Well, as you said, all commodities are going through a tough time at the moment. maybe Brexit, maybe down the road there might be some positives in it, but I suppose it's as regards dairy, and it's a world market at the present time. I know quotas had to go eventually because they'd outlived their time, but there's a flooding of dairy products in the marketplace, and there'll have to be some curtailment of supply, a world curtailment of supply. That's what I see down the road.
Similar enough to what Hogan is proposing at the moment.
Yes, but that is, of course, that is European, but it's the Americans and New Zealand that are flooding the market at the present time. And until there's a drought, maybe in America, because they produce all the milk off grain, some type of drought is the only way we'll curtail supply.
In terms of your own job, what is that you do? What will be your I suppose your job over the next 2 years? What is it the Connacht chairman actually does?
Well, the Connacht chairman, he's nominated by the people of Connacht, and that position entails whatever the president will give you different issues to deal with, or the different commodities to deal with, or issues within the Connacht region, as maybe SSCs, flooding, and various issues like that. Also, you'll be on the board of IFA, where you'll be meeting the president on a more regular basis.
Pádraig, hearty congratulations from all, and best of luck in the next few years.
Thanks.
I'm here with Eddie David. Eddie, commiserations.
Well, yes, indeed. I suppose it's disappointing after all the work we put in. Both myself and Pádraig, we travelled the length and breadth of Connacht over the last 4 or 5 weeks, and I will give great credit to Pádraig. It was a clean campaign. Both of us respected each other.
You talked about in your speech after the official result was announced that there isn't enough fairness in Connacht. What do you mean by that?
Well, I suppose I have said this on several occasions. The major problem is the votes. The way the system is, we never can win in Sligo, Leitrim or Roscommon. The 3 small counties, that is at a disadvantage because of the population density in those areas. We have a very sparse population in those 3 areas. We have only 19 branches in Sligo, we have 17 in Leitrim, and we have 34 in Roscommon. So I suppose when you add that up against the 77 branches that Galway has and the 56 branches Mayo has, the sums doesn't add up. And it's proven it there once again tonight.
And how are you going to change that problem? You talked about a rotating chairman, or have you discussed this with Joe Healy?
I have discussed it with Joe Healy. I intend to discuss it in the future with Joe Healy. We put up that resolution to National Council. It wasn't dealt with very successfully or very well. I think that has to be taken back on the agenda again and has to be discussed, and we have to get a change in the system. The system that's wrong. It's not the people. I have no problem with the people of Mayo or the people of Galway. They have the numbers there, but the system is wrong.
Eddie David, thank you very, very much for your time.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Hundreds of vets were in Dublin for the World Buiatrics Congress this week. That's the science of cattle health, in case you didn't know. Irish Farmers Journal news journalist Amy Nora Fitzgibbon interviewed Dr. Margaret Good, who's the head of the TB eradication programme in the Department of Agriculture.
So Margaret, your presentation this morning was very interesting, and it seems the good news is that bovine TB is on a declining trajectory. The number of reactor animals has gone down by 2/3 between 1999 and 2015. So what, in your opinion, is the main contributory factor to this late decline in TB?
Well, we have a comprehensive programme that tries to address all the issues. And one of the issues that has been identified as being a major problem in Ireland was the fact that we have a wildlife problem in badgers. And badgers share the environment very much with cattle. They live in the hedgerows. So one of the basic principle is that, you know, if you're going to try and tackle a disease, you can't just tackle it in one species in that environment. It took us quite a while for us to accept that, like, badgers actually were a significant contributor, and that if we reduced badger populations, the TB levels in cattle fell. So in the early 2000s, we started to have a very focused approach that we would try to remove badgers in the areas where they were a significant contributor to the TB problem in cattle.
What are the main challenges facing the badger? Well, first the culling, and then I know you're hoping to bring in a vaccination program as well.
Yeah.
So,
well, the culling, we don't want to threaten the population in any way. So we've been comparing the size of our population with the size of the population in Greater Europe. And in mainland Europe, the number of badgers and the density of badgers is much lower than it is here in Ireland. So basing it on Europe, we can actually reduce our badger population without threatening the species. But if we can do that, to reduce the population, you reduce the potential for contact, not just the potential for contact with cattle, but also the potential for contact between badgers, between an infected badger and a susceptible badger. Because after all, there's no testing in badgers, so the clinically ill ones are still out there.
Yeah.
So if you can reduce the opportunity for contact, you reduce the TB levels in the badgers. And our estimate is at this stage we have reduced the TB levels in badgers conservatively by 50%.
Wow.
Since when? Since the early 2000s.
Okay.
And then our second focus is to try and develop a vaccine so that we can substitute vaccination for culling.
Okay.
We're looking, at the moment we have a trial with injectable vaccine, and we're using the same injectable vaccine as they use in babies. If it's safe for babies, it was going to be safe for badgers, and when we checked, yes it was. Great, we could use BCG. And we're doing a number of different areas where we had culled badgers. So we've taken one area where we're going to vaccinate instead of culling and let the population start to rebuild, and comparing that with a similar area where we're going to maintain culling and just check as we go along, does letting this badger population start to rebuild and substituting with vaccine, do things get any worse? Because if it's not worse than culling, we can replace culling with vaccination.
And what about the other wildlife issue, which is deer? I know it's not such a hot issue as the badgers, but it is an issue.
It's an issue very specifically in one area of the country where we have gotten TB levels in deer, even low-grade TB levels for many years.
County
and
Wicklow.
that's County Wicklow. And we did a trial in an area about 2008, and we found higher levels than we would have liked. We looked again, 2014-15, and the levels are still very high. Now we're doing this alongside the National Parks and Wildlife Service, who are responsible for all wildlife throughout the country. They're looking at the possibility of using hunters and licenses to actually reduce the deer density in that hotspot area. So we'd like to use the routine hunters, the routine licenses, and maybe do some extra work on gland examination, because the TB concentrates in various different glands. But that's very much in the discussion stage as yet, and how do we organise it, how will we finance it, who'll do the work, because this is not work that's being done by anybody yet.
It needs to create a kind of I suppose, people who are in charge of that area.
Yes,
sort of a deer management committee.
Exactly, and work with, there is a deer management forum, so we're going to have to work with them as well. So this is very much in the discussion stage yet. It'll probably take 2 years to do when we start it. I would hope we would start it sooner rather than later.
Well, to move on, I suppose, from the wildlife issue, like reactor removal time, for example, should we be trying to remove reactors more promptly than the department is at the moment? Like we heard it was something like 23 days.
Well, 23 days is an average, right? And there would be none of us really terribly happy with longer than 23 days. So but the majority of animals are much earlier. But we do meet animals where they're advanced in pregnancy and they can't be removed. We have animals that have been medicated and they can't be removed until the withdrawal period has expired. Or we've got Christmas and everything is shut for 2 weeks and we can't get anything killed.
And I know you've seen the first-hand effects of TB, of course, and you know yourself how frustrating it is for farmers' place. I suppose most farmers want them off as soon as possible.
They do. They want them off as soon as possible because the clock doesn't start ticking to clear the herd until the animal is gone. Yeah. And as well as that, there's the difficulties of isolating the animal. So we will talk isolation and where the animals could be isolated and how to break the contact between the animal and the rest of the herd as best possible, with the least risk if people have to hold on to reactors because they can't be removed for one reason or another.
And then so finally, are you confident then that we can eradicate TB by 2030?
I'm quietly confident that we can make officially TB free as per the directive by 2030. I would think that we will probably have to continue a vaccine programme in badgers longer than that, because if we leave any behind, it will come back. If we leave the seed there for it to recrudesce, it will recrudesce.
Okay, thank you very much, Margaret.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Our machinery editor, James Maloney, was at the Keenan's Open Day in Boris last week. There he spoke to two farmers using the Irish manufacturers' machines overseas. Werner Pinar from South Africa and Alan Warwick from Canada.
Lads, you're here on the start of, I suppose, a new adventure for Keenan's, taken over by Alltech. You're both using the Keenan feeder for a number of years, I'd say, are you?
I'm actually thinking about buying my first Keenan at this stage, and especially in South Africa, it's such big operations that you have to think about new technology all the time, and I think Keenan has produced such a product, and that's why I'm here to have a look at it.
And what size of a wagon or a feeder wagon would you be looking at?
I'm looking at this stage. I'm looking at three of the bigger ones, the 400 series.
Yeah.
And so
about 28 cube, is it?
The 28 cubes, yeah. And especially with the whole system and the support from Keenan and Alltech with regards to the InTouch system, I think it's wonderful with them constantly being involved in your farming operations. It's
taking a little bit of hassle out of it, isn't it? And it's not on a piece of paper, it's there, it's coming to the phone and it's information.
Through the internet. And I think technology, I think they're right up there with regards to technology in the agricultural industry and the feeding industry. So,
Just for our readers, just to give you a sense of the scale of the farming in the Free State in South Africa, what's it like?
We have about 60,000 of cattle and sheep.
60,000 head of cattle
moving through the system annually, and the arable is it's about 17,000 hectares of arable farming, of maize and soybeans, and then I think close to heart is the game in South Africa. The genetic breeding of buffalo and sable and roans, and then the lions. It's African. It's close to heart.
It's very, very varied.
It's a very diverse. Everybody in South Africa, all the farmers have a very diverse operation, and it's a big operations going on.
And the grain that you grow on the farm, is that all for the beef herd? Is it?
No. We export most of our grain to the African market. And we keep some of it back for the feeding of the animals, but mainly we produce our grain for export.
And there's a huge drought out there at the minute, the worst in 100 years.
It's the worst drought in 100 years. So it's been tough times in South Africa with regard to agriculture and farming, but we had some good rain, and we're optimistic about what's happening.
And has that driven the prices of your grain?
It's affecting the whole market, from food in supermarkets to feed prices. Everything is being affected by the drought, but we'll get there, and I think it all cancels itself out with America having a big drought as well, and too much rain in some parts. I think the grain prices in South Africa are so good that we're actually making money, although it's very dry. So
excellent. I'll turn to you, Alan. You're from a different side of the world.
Yes, indeed.
Canada, Ontario,
yes.
Canada.
Yes.
And I suppose same question. Are you thinking about buying a Keenan or using a Keenan?
I just work for a dairy farmer in Ontario,
and I've worked with the Keenan for 16 years actually.
16 years?
Yeah.
And which model Keenan had
I
on the farm?
have the 360, I think, which is 20 cubic metres, yeah.
And you've found that the backup and the service from the Keenan is...
Absolutely, yeah. We've only had the PACE programme for the last 4 years, but that's been a huge bonus for our business. We're in dairy and beef, and the support that we've had from the various people in that department, whether it be Nigel or Eva, has been phenomenal. Just a phone call away and your problems are fixed.
Your problem is solved.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing.
It's a remarkable how the technology is making the world so small.
Absolutely, and for me as a non-technological person, to be sitting in my office at the farm, calling up Eva, and she'll say, open the team viewer, and watch her changing everything on my system, and I'm watching it happen before my eyes. It's amazing, yeah. And I'm not technologically, I can work out my own stuff, but to have these people in place that you can just call and it's done immediately. It's amazing, yeah.
And just on the size of the scale, just give us a sense of the scale of the farm or the size of the farm that you're working on in Canada.
We're farming about 2,000 acres. We grow, most of what we grow is we feed back through the farm.
Yeah.
We grow some soybeans, maybe 120, 150 acres a year, but we're about 2,000 acres, and most of that, as I say, is haylage, hay, corn, maize silage, and straw, wheat straw. We do a lot of wheat straw.
Just might ask you a quick question. What do you think of Brexit at the minute, or watching that?
It's been weird because I've been away from England for so long, and I came back to England last week just for a holiday, so I was dropped right in the middle of it. But the fellow I'm working with on holiday, he's a farmer, dairy farmer, who milks about 150 cows, and he's right against. So he was for the exit.
For the exit.
Yeah, but yet I've gone in the pubs a few nights, and you get them talking, and it's totally mixed. There's no primary reason to why people have gone one way or the other.
Yeah.
So it's a very confusing for me.
Yeah.
But it's going to have some serious changes happening.
Nobody appears to have the full picture on anything.
No. And I was talking to Jerry today, and he was saying that since that vote, the beef price has gone down in England, and the lamb price has gone down. But here in Ireland, the beef and the lamb prices have gone up.
Yeah.
So they've benefited from that decision already here.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your trip here in Ireland.
This is my first trip to Ireland, and it was the lady in the In Touch department, Eva, who called me last week and just said, you should be here. This is going to be a big day for Keenan. So it's all very good.
Very good. Thanks, Alan.
Thank you very much.
And have a safe trip home.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
This week is Farm Safety Week, and the authorities in Northern Ireland have decided to involve more of the businesses in contact with farmers every day to spread their safety message. The Irish Farmers Journal's Northern Ireland correspondent, Peter McCann, asked Agriculture Minister Michelle McElveen and Health and Safety Chief Executive Keith Morrison about the Farm Safety Affiliate Scheme.
Minister McElveen, can you just speak to me about the scheme and I suppose some of the important messages with farm safety, not just this week, but I suppose every week that people are working on farms?
Yeah, I think we just have to be conscious of the risk that people are putting themselves under on a daily basis. You have farmers who are obviously working alone, and it really is about sort of heightening the awareness. Today's scheme really just sort of is to recognise that and the fact that there are over 24,000 farm businesses in Northern Ireland, and it's really about sort of getting the message out via as many partners as possible. So that's why we've brought on board groups such as PowerNI, you've got ASDA, you've got the Girl Guides, LMC and various others, and it's really about making sure that message and a consistent message is getting out there.
Minister McElveen, thanks very much. I'm now joined by Keith Morrison. He's Chief Executive, the Health and Safety Executive in Northern Ireland. Keith, can you just explain to me that this new scheme has been launched this week, Farm Safety Week?
Yeah, the Farm Safety Affiliate Scheme is an opportunity for any industry and any supporter in Northern Ireland to get involved in farm safety. The concept is that government can't do it all, the Ulster Farmers Union and the partnership members can't do it all, but there are so many agri-food companies, so many machinery dealers, banks, you name it, out there that come into contact with farmers every day. So it's really leveraging their contact to make sure we can get farm safety messages out as widely as possible.
And what is the protocol for one of the partners in this scheme? So say if one of the groups is on farm, what are they saying to farmers?
Right, well, and to enable someone to join the scheme, there's an application process. There are 5 or 6 areas that we've identified where people can contribute. Maybe that's promotional material, maybe that's running some training events, maybe that's using their premises, maybe that's some sponsorship. So again, potential applicants would fill in the form and say, here's where we think we can help promote farm safety. That'll be assessed by a panel, and then the Farm Safety Partnership will take a decision on that.
Keith, thanks very much for your time.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Communications Minister Denis Naughton unveiled more details of the National Broadband Plan this week. Irish Country Living consumer editor Ciara Leahy was there, and she takes us through the latest news in efforts to finally deliver high-speed internet access for rural Ireland.
For some of our readers there who don't know much about it, explain exactly what is the National Broadband Plan.
Okay, Anthony, so the National Broadband Plan is the government solution to provide high-speed internet to areas of the country where, the commercial sector just wouldn't invest on its own because it's too expensive. And these really are rural areas that, where a lot of our readers are living. So it includes 94% of farms, 40% of primary schools, and over 63,000 non-farm businesses such as SMEs, B&Bs, shops, where a lot of our readers are based. So by the end of this plan, every house in the country will have high-speed broadband, and it's looking to be finished by 2021.
And the National Broadband Plan's been in the making now for a few years, hasn't it?
It has, but things really kicked off 2 years ago, and last September we had the public procurement process start, where companies started tendering for the contract. Yesterday we had even more announcements, and I suppose one of the key announcements is the way in which this whole operation is going to run now. So there were a few options in the mix until last December, 5 specifically, and it was narrowed down to 2. It was decided yesterday in the Cabinet that the government now will be going what they call the GAP model. So this means a private entity will come on board, they're going to finance it, design it, build it, own it and operate the entire network with contractual obligations to the department. This differs from the other option. The other option was where the government would actually own the asset after 25 years. It has now been decided that the government will not own this asset after 25 years. Now, this is quite surprising, really, that the government went with the GAP model, because up until now, Minister Naughton, he was very vocal that he wanted the infrastructures to be government owned. He basically said, we don't want to repeat the mistakes of what happened with Telecom Éireann. But yesterday, in the media briefing, attended by myself and to other media, he explained the reasons why. And I suppose the biggest reason he is saying is he's very much looking at the short term. He explained that from an exchequer point of view, there would be between 500 and 600 million needed over the next 6 years in order to go with the alternative model. It would mean pulling funding from government projects including housing and homelessness, health and climate action. These are all key priorities for the government at the moment, and he basically felt that it was too much. Furthermore, if the government had chosen the alternative, it would have cost them somewhere between 50 to 70% more, and it would have added 6 months more to the rollout of the whole operation as well. So he was basically looking at the more short-term impacts rather than the long-term. It will mean that in 2042, the government will be letting go of this infrastructure.
You said it's going up for contract. Do we know what companies are tendering?
Yeah, up until now there were 5 companies tendering, but we learned yesterday that only 3 have progressed. So the 3 of that have progressed that we're aware of is Air, which is the state's largest telco, Cyro, the joint venture between ESB and Vodafone, and finally eNet. The ones that dropped out of the race are Gigabyte Fibre and Imagine. So basically we're down to 3 now. Not necessarily one might win it, it could be a combination of 2 or more.
There was also another big announcement that an extra 170,000 premises are now to be included in the NBP, isn't there?
That's right. So the National Broadband Plan, as we mentioned, is investing into areas of the country that private companies are not investing in. And many of those private companies are already rolling out big fibre to the home networks, at the moment across the bigger towns. I'm sure you'll have seen the ads and the vans on the roads. So there are about 170,000 premises who we believe will be supplied by these private companies. But basically, they're now finding out when they are testing them that a large number of these premises do not support broadband which is of high enough quality. So now they are now being included in the broadband plan as well.
I suppose just for our readers, what would that mean?
It means that if you were one of those people that thought that you were going to be provided by the private companies, it means you're going to be waiting a bit longer for your broadband now. A lot of people are expecting that towards the end of the year they were going to get this. But don't worry, you're not going to be waiting until 2021 or anything like that. The houses that were in this blue area of the map, of the government map, they're mostly on the outskirts of town where, look, the infrastructure will be starting anyway, though, in those kind of bigger areas. So they can expect to be serviced in the early days.
Will this not push out the delivery time for people in rural areas, no?
I mean, you would think that, Anthony, and that's what we put to the Minister. We were told not really, because essentially these are areas that the infrastructure will be passing through anyway. So it's just providing more homes with the infrastructure that's going in anyway. Now, whether this is going to be the reality or not, we'll wait and see. Overall, the plan is running about 6 months behind the schedule.
Ciara Leahy, thank you very much.
Thanks.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie, on the Irish Farmers Journal app and on iTunes every Thursday. Brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.